The tax man cometh. Property taxes are due a week from tomorrow in New Brunswick, even for people who are appealing hefty increases in their assessments. 2,000 people whose bills reflected bogus renovations have been given an extension, but the Premier has admitted as many as 100,000 bills could be out of whack because of a new assessment system. And the PC opposition believes they too deserve some sort of break. Opposition leader Blaine Higgs is joining us tonight from St. John's. So if you were Premier, what would you do in this situation, Mr. Higgs?
Well, long ago, Steve, I first would have admitted that we had a problem and we had to find a solution. And I would have thought the right solution would have been to revert back to the 2016 assessments until the problem got fixed and not expect taxpayers just to bear the brunt of it.
Many of us, of course, overpay our income tax or our CPP or EI premiums, and we have to settle for a refund with interest after the fact. What's wrong with doing that in this case?
Well, because we know the bills are wrong. You know, the Premier's basically said, you know, just shut up and pay up. And we'll refund it maybe, or we won't refund it, actually. It'll go as a credit to next year's tax bill.
Right.
And we'll determine it sometime between now and 2018 or in 2018. And when we know we have we do have a law in place that says you can't, your bills won't go up by more than 10% in a given year without a renovation situation. Mm-hmm. And yet that's being ignored. So we have bills we know are bogus because of false renovations. We have bills that are higher than the 10%, and the Premier should just basically say, look, we won't go over 10% because that is the law, or we revert back to 2016 and make it fair to everyone until we get this fixed.
Whatever the problem with the assessment system, Mr. Higgs, we also know there's some politics involved in this. You believe there was interference from the Premier's office to rush this new system into place, and you've alleged that there may be more than incompetence involved here. You've said there may be fraud, but what leads you to think there was anything more than just a hurry to move on to something more efficient or something more lucrative here?
Well, when the Premier has tried so hard in the last 2 months, and particularly while we're in the legislature, to cover this up and basically not bring out the details, which we found out through leaked documents, not from the Premier's admission before or after, you know, that's what makes it all a scandal, all makes it more concerning. Yeah. And when you get into a situation like we have right now, where there's still not an admission, we have a judicial review as such, but the judicial review is very limited. And it goes through the ECO office for final vetting before it ever reaches the public.
I want to come back to the judicial review in a minute, but I do want to ask you again, what is it that would lead you to suggest fraud? Fraud is a very serious allegation to make. I mean, some people would see incompetence, some people would see politics. What do you see that suggests it might be fraud?
Well, the cover-up of not admitting that the decision was made in the Premier's office, I mean, that was ignored for the whole entire time the legislature was in. The verification that it indeed did come from the Premier's office, and they indeed were told about the details of a fast-track model and the risks, yeah, but yet still tried to hide that information. So why would you work that hard to hide the truth? And that's the concern, is that's where we spent the last 2 months, is the Premier has tried to hide the truth.
What did you know about this new assessment system when you were finance minister? Because apparently it was on the radar, at least at that time. What did you know?
It was on the radar only because our assessments were well behind. Like, we were talking 20, 25 years in some cases where the home hadn't been assessed. Right. And so what you find is when it finally gets assessed, well, the market has changed dramatically in the value of that home. And people were upset about the jump in their assessment, not the fact that the assessment was wrong, just the fact that it actually moved in such a dramatic fashion, right, because it hadn't been assessed for a long time. That's why the cap was put in place. You mentioned the inquiry. Justice Joseph Robertson is now reviewing what happened here. Has he or anybody with the inquiry spoken to you about any of this? No, he is not. And I would be very surprised if indeed he ever does. I do hope, however, he gets an opportunity to speak to the actual assessors, yep, in the office, but I bet he won't. You have also said that he needs more power to subpoena witnesses if necessary, to compel people to talk. Are you aware of anybody who is refusing to provide information to Justice Robertson at this point? Well, no, I am not, but I am, when reading his document, which is all I have to go by at this point, mm-hmm, is that he has the right to request information or look for information, but he has no authority to actually subpoena someone, or they have any obligation to actually provide it to him. And we will never know. Yeah. Unless someone would come forward. I think the more likelihood is that the assessors won't be involved, they won't be asked, and you'll never get the full story. And that document specifically does not allow a view into the Premier's or the Premier's office action in all of this.
Finally, as part of all the politics in this, there has been an attempt to deflect some attention back to you. The Premier questioned your role in negotiating the LNG tax deal, the Irving deal with the City of St. John a decade ago. You made it pretty clear you had no role in that. But is there anything from your days as an Irving executive that is a possible conflict of interest for you now in any respect?
No. The issue for me in the days that I worked for Irving was what I learned there and how to manage money and get better value for dollars, and that now includes taxpayer dollars. And I value that experience because I'd like to apply that same logic and value for hard-earned money to what I see in government.
But to be clear, while in politics, have you ever recused yourself from any file because of your role with Irving Oil? Not to my recollection. I mean, there could be files that would come forward in cabinet, and in which case we would walk away or step out. But I'd really have to go back and look at that because I don't recall any of them. Okay. But that would be a common practice. If in a cabinet meeting something came forward and you say, well, because of my former job, I would have knowledge of that. I don't recall that happening, but it could be a possibility, and certainly I would walk out of any meeting that involved that. Any problem with your assessment? Oh, it didn't go down. It continues to rise, but it wasn't a massive jump, but it's certainly high enough, so it just continued to stay there. Are you appealing? No, I'm not. I appealed it before and lost. No. So once burned, twice shy. The odds of me appealing. Well, the odds of me getting through it this time would probably be pretty remote, and plus I wouldn't find out till after the election, most likely. Yeah, right. There is an election coming. It's not that far away. We appreciate your time tonight, Mr. Higgs. Good of you to come. You're very welcome, Steve. Have a good evening. The leader of the New Brunswick Progressive Conservative Party, the leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition in Fredericton, Blaine Higgs, tonight from St. John. Back with more here in just a moment.